Desmond was on his first collection of the morning when he heard something he couldn't identify. He found the dog first, then the box, then the baby, alive, warm, on a night that had dropped to 3 degrees. Nobody knew where she came from. Nobody owned her. She was a stray. This is that story. It was a Tuesday in January. Desmond had been a refuse collector for 11 years and had the specific relationship with early mornings that the work produces. Comfortable with the dark, with the cold, with the particular silence of streets before the city remembers itself. He had done this round 300 times. He knew every bin, every gate, every corner. He did not know the sound. It came from behind the community centre on Morley Street, a low, intermittent sound that he registered before he understood it. That made him stop the lorry and get out in the dark at 6:15 on a January morning, when the temperature had been 3 degrees overnight and was not yet 4. He found the dog first. She was a medium-sized mixed breed. The specific, indeterminate coloring of a dog that has been outside long enough for her coat to carry the street. And she was curled around a cardboard box against the community center wall with the deliberate, encompassing position of a dog that has made a decision about where she is and is not moving. She looked at Desmond. She did not move. Desmond looked at the box. He heard the sound again. He opened the box. The baby was 4 days old. He would not know this until later. What he knew in that moment, crouching in the dark behind a community center on a January morning, was that the baby was alive, breathing, warm, her face turned toward the side of the box that had been against the dog, warm, 3 degrees overnight. He called 999. The dog stayed beside the box until the paramedics arrived. She stayed while they assessed the baby. She stayed while they lifted Amara. The name would come later, given by the nurses, a placeholder that became permanent, into the ambulance. When the ambulance doors closed, she sat down on the pavement. She did not follow. She had done what she came to do. Nobody knew where she had come from. Nobody owned her. She was a stray. And in the morning, when Desmond found her, the baby she had stayed beside through the night was alive. The pediatric team would spend 3 days trying to account for how CT120ROICTA fast TMNGMT oak, a newborn baby in a cardboard box, a January night at 3 degrees. A stray dog that nobody owned, curled around the box until morning. The baby should not have survived the night. The pediatric team said so. The temperature said so. Everything said so except the baby, who was alive and warm when Desmond opened the box at 6:15. Subscribe now if you haven't already. Ring the bell, because this story asks a question that science is still working to fully answer. What made a stray dog, with no owner, no bond, no reason, stay beside a cardboard box through a 3-degree night? Before we go on, has an animal ever done something for a stranger? Not for the person they lived with, not for someone they knew, for a stranger? Tell us in the comments, because what this dog did has a scientific explanation, and by the end of this story, the explanation will change how you think about what animals are capable of when nobody is asking anything of them. Now, back to Desmond, who is standing in the car park of a hospital at 7 in the morning, still in his work clothes, waiting to find out if the baby he found is going to be all right. Sexy Ian Thea Fiti Imal Disimr. Desmond and Amara and Chloe and the stray dog are characters we created. The abandonment, the January night, the discovery, these events are fictional. But the science underneath them is real. A A dog's resting core temperature is between 38 and 39 degrees Celsius, significantly higher than a human's. The radiant heat produced by a dog's body in close, sustained proximity to a newborn in a contained space is documented as sufficient to maintain survivable core temperature in conditions that would otherwise be fatal. There are real and documented cases of animals providing thermal protection to vulnerable humans and other animals in extreme conditions. We made these characters so the truth underneath them could be told as fully as possible. The dog in this story is fictional. What she did is not. Esita for Besike Star. Desmond had 2 daughters. They were 7 and 9 now. The specific ages of children who still wanted to be carried occasionally, and who were also beginning to insist on doing everything themselves. And he navigated this contradiction with the patient good humor of a father who understood that both things were true at the same time. He had been doing the early shift for 6 years, since the younger one was born, when the logistics of childcare had made the early start the practical choice. His wife Yvonne worked school hours. The maths worked. He had made his peace with 4:30 alarm calls and had found, over time, that the early morning had qualities he had not expected. The quiet, the particular light, the sense of a city not yet performing itself. He was not a man given to drama. 11 years of refuse collection had given him a comprehensive and unsentimental relationship with what people discarded, with the things that ended up in the wrong places, with the specific human archaeology of what gets left behind. Nothing had prepared him for the box. He had given his statement to the police at the hospital. He had sat in a waiting room chair in his high visibility jacket and answered the questions carefully and honestly. He had described the sound, the dog, the box, the baby. He had described the temperature of the baby's face against his hand when he had touched her cheek to check. Warm, he said. She was warm. The officer had written this down. Desmond had driven home at 9. Yvonne had been at the school run. He had sat at the kitchen table and drunk tea and looked at the wall for a long time. He thought about the dog, not the baby. The baby was in the hospital, was being cared for, was in the right hands now. He thought about the dog, who had stayed beside the box until the ambulance doors closed and had then sat down on the pavement. He thought about what it had cost her, a January night at 3 degrees. The specific expenditure of heat that sustained proximity requires. The choice, if choice was the right word, to stay. He thought she didn't have to. He thought she had nothing to gain. He thought she stayed anyway. Chloe was 17. This detail would emerge over the following days as the investigation found its way to her. A 17-year-old who had concealed a pregnancy, who had been alone in a crisis that had no shape she could manage, who had made a decision in the specific desperation of a person who has run out of every other option. She was not the villain of the story. She was a child who had been failed by enough people and enough systems that she had arrived at a cardboard box behind a community center on a January night, believing it was the only thing left. The stray dog had not known any of this. The stray dog had only known that there was something small and warm and alive in the box, and that the night was cold, and that staying was possible, so she had stayed, as Fafititei CNC doctor. Fatima Osei was the consultant pediatrician who received Amara on the Tuesday morning. She had been in pediatric emergency medicine for 15 years and had the specific quality of a clinician who does not reach for explanations before the data supports them. She was thorough. She was precise. She was, in the specific way of good emergency physicians, very difficult to surprise. Amara's core temperature on arrival was 36.1 degrees Celsius. This surprised her, a newborn infant, unclothed except for a thin blanket, in a cardboard box, in 3-degree overnight temperatures, for an estimated 6 to 8 hours. The expected core temperature on arrival was hypothermic, dangerously so. The arithmetic of heat loss in those conditions produced a number that was not compatible with the presentation in front of her. She examined Amara thoroughly. She ordered the standard investigations. She documented everything. She called the neonatal team. She also called the police liaison. "Tell me about the dog," she said. The liaison read from the statement. The dog's position: curled around the box, not beside it. The specific encompassing posture Desmond had described. The sustained proximity through the night. Dr. Ose sat with this. She called a colleague, Dr. James Whitfield, a veterinary physiologist at the university who had consulted with the hospital before on animal-related cases and whose specific expertise was thermoregulation in domestic animals. She described the situation. Dr. Whitfield was quiet for a moment. "A medium-sized dog," he said. "Resting core temperature 38.5 degrees. Curled around a cardboard box in sustained contact or near contact for 6 to 8 hours. Yes," Dr. Ose said. "The box would have acted as an insulating chamber," Dr. Whitfield said. "The dog's radiant heat output, in that configuration, sustained, enclosed, with the box concentrating rather than dispersing the thermal energy, could absolutely have maintained survivable temperature in a newborn of that weight for that duration. Absolutely," Dr. Ose repeated. "It would not be comfortable for the dog," Dr. Whitfield said. "Sustained heat expenditure in cold conditions costs something. She would have been cold by morning." Dr. Ose thought about the dog sitting on the pavement after the ambulance doors closed. "She stayed all night," Dr. Ose said. "Yes," Dr. Whitfield said. "That is the part I cannot fully account for mechanically. The thermoregulation I can explain. The decision to stay," he paused. "That is a different question." "What kind of question is it?" Dr. Ose asked. "A biological one," Dr. Whitfield said. "There is research on interspecies caregiving responses in mammals, the documented tendency of some mammals to respond to distress signals from infants of other species. Neonatal distress vocalizations share acoustic features across mammalian species. A hungry, cold newborn produces sounds that may trigger a caregiving response in an adult mammal regardless of species. The dog heard a baby crying," Dr. Ose said. "The dog heard something that sounded, in the biological register, like an infant in distress," Dr. Whitfield said. "And she responded the way mammals sometimes respond to that sound. She stayed close. She provided warmth. She did not leave." Dr. Ose looked at Amara in the incubator, at the baby who was alive, because a stray dog had heard her crying in the dark and had stayed. "What do we call that?" she said. "Interspecies alloparental behavior," Dr. Whitfield said. "Documented in the literature. Rare, but documented. And in plain language," Dr. Ose said. Dr. Whitfield was quiet for a moment. "In plain language," he said, "the dog took care of her. Session 6.star EGMGM yoke. We want to stop here, because what Dr. Whitfield just described, interspecies alloparental behavior, a mammal responding to the distress signals of an infant of another species, is not a metaphor. It is a documented biological mechanism. The dog heard something in Amara's crying that registered in the oldest part of her brain as infant in distress, and she responded the way mammals have been responding to that signal for millions of years. She stayed close. She provided warmth. She did not leave. Nobody trained her to do this. Nobody asked her to. She had no owner, no home. No reason to be behind that community center at all. She was just a stray dog on a cold night who heard something that sounded like it needed her. And she stayed. Tell us in the comments, does this change how you think about what animals are capable of? Not trained animals. Not bonded animals. Strays. Animals with nothing. Animals who owe nothing to anyone. Because Amara is alive, and the dog is still out there somewhere, and nobody has found her yet. CCTO and 70 KHOE, the investigation found Chloe on the Thursday. She was 17 years old, and she had been staying with a friend since the Tuesday night, and she had not slept, and she had been watching the news on her phone with the specific paralyzed attention of a person waiting for a consequence they cannot outrun. The family liaison officer was a woman named Sandra. Sandra had been doing this work for 12 years. She had the specific quality of a professional who understands that the person in front of her is not a case, but a child, a 17-year-old child who had been alone in a crisis and who was now in a different kind of alone that was harder in different ways. She did not lead with the law. She led with the baby is alive. Chloe had made a sound that Sandra would remember for a long time, not a cry, something before crying. The specific release of a person who has been holding something so tightly that the letting go is physical. She's alive, Chloe said. She's alive, Sandra said. She's in hospital. She's being looked after. She's going to be okay. Chloe pressed both hands over her face. Sandra waited. The dog, Chloe said eventually. Her voice was muffled behind her hands. Was there a dog? Sandra looked at her. Yes, she said carefully. There was a dog. Do you know about the dog? Chloe lowered her hands. She was there when I left, Chloe said. She came while I was. She stopped. She just came. Out of nowhere. And she sat beside the box. And I didn't know what to do and I was so scared. And she sat there. And I thought. She stopped again. What did you think? Sandra said. I thought maybe she'd stay. Chloe said. I didn't know if she would. But I thought maybe. And I didn't know what else to do. Sandra sat with this for a long moment. A 17-year-old girl, alone, in crisis, on a January night, had left her baby beside a stray dog because the dog had come and sat down, and something in that, the presence, the warmth, the specific steadiness of an animal that had arrived without being asked, had felt like enough. It had been enough. She stayed all night, Sandra said. Chloe looked at her. All night, she said. All night, Sandra said. Until the paramedics came. Chloe was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, I want to see her. Amara, can I see her? Sandra said, yes, we'll arrange that. But first, I need you to talk to me about everything. From the beginning. Because there are people who want to help you, Chloe, and the beginning is where we start. Sesian 80 SKEPICS and Reso Uion. The hospital's safeguarding process was automatic and thorough. Dr. Oze had flagged the case immediately, not because of any suspicion beyond the presenting facts, but because a 4-day-old abandoned infant required the full framework of investigation and support that the system existed to provide. The process found Chloe. The process found the specific constellation of failures, the absent father, the unsupportive home, The school that had missed the signs, the GP appointment that hadn't happened, the support services that had not been reached, that had produced a 17-year-old girl alone on a January night with no option she could see. The family court process was careful and humane. The outcome was not immediate reunification. It could not be, in the circumstances. But it was a pathway, a plan. The specific structure of a system trying to build, from the materials available, something that could eventually be called a family. Chloe was given support. Real support, housing, counseling, the consistent presence of a social worker named Marcus, who had the quality of steadiness that the work required and who understood that the goal was not punishment, but possibility. She worked toward Amara with the specific focused determination of a person who has been given a reason. Dr. Oze, in the weeks after Amara's discharge to foster care, had been in contact with Dr. Whitfield about documenting the case formally. The thermal data is straightforward, Dr. Whitfield said. The behavioral element is more complex. We'd need to be careful about the claims we make. I'm not asking you to make claims, Dr. Oze said. I'm asking you to document what happened. The temperature on arrival, the configuration Desmond described, the mechanism by which it was possible, and the dog, Dr. Whitfield said. And the dog, Dr. Oze said. Whatever you can say with confidence about why she stayed. The paper took 8 months to write. It was careful and precise in the way that good science is careful and precise, making no claim beyond what the data supported, framing the behavioral element as consistent with documented interspecies alloparental responses, rather than attributing intention or decision to an animal in a way the evidence could not justify. Desmond was interviewed for the paper. He sat in Dr. Whitfield's office and described what he had found in the specific plain language of a man who had been there. At the end of the interview, Dr. Whitfield asked, "Is there anything you want to add? Anything that isn't in your original statement?" Desmond thought about this. "When I found her," he said, "the dog, she looked at me, and she didn't move. She just looked at me, like she was waiting to see if I was going to do the right thing." He paused. "I don't know if that's scientific," he said. "It's not," Dr. Whitfield said. "But I'm going to write it down anyway. SCTION 9. TH Doguas Fo Yuand. The appeal went out 6 weeks after Amara was found. It was Dr. Oze's idea. She had been thinking about the dog, about the fact that an animal who had done what this dog had done was still on the streets, still unnamed, still without the specific thing that her actions had given Amara: safety. The appeal was simple. A description: medium-sized, mixed breed, indeterminate coloring, last seen on Morley Street on a Tuesday in January. A photograph that Desmond had taken on his phone in the moments before he called 999, slightly blurred in the dark, but clear enough. It was shared by the local paper, then by a regional news station, then by a national animal welfare organization whose social media coordinator understood instinctively that this was not a standard stray dog appeal. By the end of the first day, it had been shared 40,000 times. She was found on the Thursday. A woman named Bernadette, who ran a dog rescue in the next town, had seen the appeal and had recognized the dog, had taken her in 2 weeks before the January night, had been unable to find her a home, had let her out one morning and not seen her return. Bernadette called the number in the appeal. She said, "I think I know your dog." The dog was brought to the rescue center. Desmond was asked if he could come to confirm the identification. He drove there on his day off. He walked into the kennels. The dog looked at him. He crouched down. She came to him. "That's her," he said. He stayed crouched for a long moment with his hand on her head. "That's her," he said again, more quietly. The dog had been examined by Bernadette's vet on her return. She was underweight. The specific leanness of a dog that has been outside for a long time and has been spending energy it could not fully replace. Her core temperature was slightly low. She had been cold. She had spent her warmth on the baby. Bernadette named her January. She was adopted 6 weeks later by a retired teacher named Gerald, who had read the story in the paper and who had driven to the rescue on a Saturday morning with the specific, quiet certainty of a person who has made a decision and is not going to unmake it. Gerald named her something else. He named her Amara. He thought the name should belong to both of them. Setim Tan. Ipaloyi and Resayuyon. Spring came slowly that year. Amara, the baby, was 4 months old when the paper was published. She was in foster care with a woman named Helen, who had been fostering for 9 years and who had the specific quality of warmth and steadiness that the work required. She was thriving, the word the health visitor used at every visit, with the specific satisfaction of a professional watching a trajectory go right. Chloe visited every week. The visits had started supervised and had become, over the months, something more relaxed, not unsupervised, not yet, but with a quality that Marcus the social worker noted in his records as progress. Chloe held Amara. Amara looked at her mother's face with the focused attention of a 4-month-old learning the world. The pathway was slow. It was real. Desmond had been asked to speak at the paper's presentation, a small academic event, not a press conference, just the specific gathering of the people who had been part of the case and the researchers who had documented it. He had not spoken at anything before. He had stood at the front of the room in his good jacket and had said, "I just got out of the lorry. I heard something. I found the dog. I found the box. I called 999. That's all I did." He paused. "The dog did the rest," he said. "All night. In the cold. For a baby she'd never met and would never see again. She did the rest." He sat down. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Dr. Ozai said, "That is the most accurate summary of the paper I have heard." Gerald brought Amara, the dog, to the event. She sat beside Gerald's chair throughout. At the end, when people were standing and talking, Desmond crouched down beside her. She looked at him. He put his hand on her head. "Good girl," he said. Her tail moved. Outside, the spring was coming. In a foster home 20 minutes away, a baby was asleep in a cot. In a supported housing flat, a 17-year-old was learning, slowly, with help, what it meant to be someone's mother. In a retired teacher's house, a dog was asleep on a sofa that she had been told she was allowed on and had immediately occupied completely. All 3 of them alive. All 3 of them warm. All 3 of them because of a January night and a cardboard box and a stray dog who had heard something in the dark and had stayed. Nobody owned her. She had nothing to gain. She stayed anyway. And in the morning, when Desmond found her, the world was slightly different from what it would have been. That is what staying costs. That is what staying makes possible. 6 Tio 1 NDCTA. Desmond heard something he couldn't identify. He found the dog first, then the box, then the baby, alive, warm. On a night that had dropped to 3 degrees, nobody owned the dog. She had nothing to gain. She had no bond, no training, No reason to stay beside a cardboard box in the cold for 8 hours. She stayed because a baby was crying and something in the oldest part of her heard it and answered. Science has a name for it. Interspecies alloparental behavior, a mammal responding to the distress signals of an infant of another species. In plain language, she took care of her, all night, in the cold, until someone came. Share this video today. Share it with everyone who has ever wondered what animals are capable of when nobody is asking anything of them. Share it with everyone who works with abandoned or at-risk infants. Share it with everyone who has a stray dog story they have never known how to tell. Because Gerald named his dog Amara. Because he thought the name should belong to both of them. Subscribe if you are new here. We are back every week. Ring the bell. And our final question: has an animal ever done something for a stranger, not for you, not for someone they knew, but for someone who needed them and had nothing to offer in return? Tell us in the comments, because the dog on Morley Street had nothing, and she gave everything she had. And in the morning, it was enough.